sciences, and we rely on not just our own in-house professional judgment, we also get a third-party appraiser to apply that professional judgment so that we are making sure that we have given it due diligence as we go through the process. So again, I'm wanting to make sure that questions on the table are being answered, but in a way that respectfully acknowledges this is what the process is. We have folks here today to share with you their expertise in this process and make sure that there is a clear understanding of the questions on the table. I'm going to have one more, I think, from the flip charts, and then I'll go around to the hands raised. This one, there are kind of two that came out relative to taxes. And so since it's a little different topic, I thought I would jump into this. I'm going to ask both of the questions because they both have sort of a tax component. Since the properties are being appraised as private, are the fees they're incurred tax deductible? And the other question is, I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted the panel of experts to explain this. Any indication by El Dorado County or other tax collector types what they may do in regard to higher appraised values? And I know in the fact sheet that came out, this goldenrod, there was a discussion on promissory tax. So maybe on those two tax questions, someone could answer.
Well, I think we know the answer to the first question. No, I don't think you can use it as a tax write-off. This appraisal methodology is just a process to arrive at a rent that we are charging you as landlords, okay, to rent that piece of public land for your personal cabin use, okay? So I don't believe, I've never heard of anybody that could take that value or the fee and use it as a tax write-off unless you're saying you're donating it to the Treasury. However, it's for the rental of public land. As far as the possessory interest tax by the counties, I've had some counties that have piggybacked on a little bit to what we have done. They have asked for the information. And again, like I said, possessory interest tax, every county does their own thing with it. They compute it differently. Some of them do base it on a type of land value. For percentage, you're paying possessory interest tax because you have a personal improvement that's within their county, okay? Theoretically, I would guess it should be a percentage of your personal improvement value. To me, that would be more equitable for a possessory interest tax. Every county figures it out differently. And again, you're paying the county taxes because they feel that every time you're using your personal improvement in their county, you have used their county services to get there and be there. That's the reasoning, right or wrong, but that's the reason. And the two have no, ours isn't a tax, ours is a rental fee, theirs is a tax.
We have not been notified by El Dorado County or Placer County regarding this process.
And I would have
They can't, because the Jarvis can, they just can't, excuse me, arbitrarily raise our property taxes. They can't.
It's not a property tax, it's possessory interest.
Okay, I have a really quick question.
Sorry, Jay, wait 1 second.
Oh, yeah, I just have a really quick question. You said you started with the value of 50,000?
No, 5,000.
No, ma'am.
5.
Okay. For the when you were talking a little while ago.
5,000.
So somebody got appraised at $5,000 their lot? Or their
Let me clarify that. My initial search for data started at 5,000, actually zero or dollar. Started off at $1 and went up to about $150,000 to $200,000, just simply as a data search. Do not misinterpret that as indications of value. That's not what I said. That's my data search. That was my initial blush at where the data might be in regards to the eventual valuation of your property. And I fine-tuned it as I went through the process. But just so you know what's inside my head sometimes, that was my initial blush. $1 to about $150,000 to $200,000 as a broad scope of data that I would look at in the process.
Okay. And then, is this the appraiser? Is this everything that we have, like how they came to our value?
You may request full copies of your lawnmower trash as well. We just ask you to do that in writing.
I thought we did that. I thought that's what we just did.
So what we sent out on January 24th is a summary report and the cover letter indicating what your fee would be in 2015. That's what you have.
Right.
And we did it as sort of two parts because we felt there was a lot of folks for which the summary report would satisfy their need for information. And it has. But we fully expected other folks might say, hey, no, we want the full report, and in fact, we're going to see the second appraisal. So you may request both.
I thought, and then that's what we did. We said we were going to get a second appraisal. I thought that would,
So if you've done that,
but we did not receive anything.
Okay, you have to ask for the full appraisal report, that's one, and if you requested that you may want to do a second appraisal report, that's a different request.
Okay.
So you've got two different requests, one for the full appraisal report, which are these 3 volumes of information, okay?
All right.
And the other one is just a package, information package. I think Jay had his...
Jay.
So I just want to explain this property tax issue.
Can we go mic here? This might be a...
In terms of the property tax issue, there are many counties in this state that are treating cabin properties and cabin land, which you are paying taxes on because they can't collect the government from these folks. They can't collect taxes from the U.S. government. You are paying taxes on that, okay? What you're not paying, and oftentimes, is you are paying property taxes based on Prop 13, which is not possessory interest tax. What's happened in some counties, and I will note this as a fact, Mono County is now charging possessory interest tax on both the cabin and the land, and how they're doing it on the land is the value of the permit, okay? So they're actually taxing the value of the permit. The appraiser, or the rather assessor, who used to be down there has just moved up to El Dorado County. So you can pretty much bet that this is going to come down the pike to us too. So just FYI.
How much of a tax, is it a big tax?
It's based on, possessory interest, which is whatever that taxation rate is. And I think it actually varies, okay? And I think that they can raise it and lower it. It is not subject to the Jarvis GAN limits at all. So just FYI, not only will our permit fees go up, but our taxes from the county are going to go up too. So
I'd just like to, for your knowledge, all special use permittees on the National Forest pay a possessory interest or interest tax. Ski areas, resorts, campground, concession areas, it's applied to all.
It's all commercial. One general question. What happens between July 2010 and January 2014 with the appraisal? Was it you just had too many, or were there too many things that you felt needed to be readdressed in the original appraisal that you got before it was released to us?
Several things happened. One, I had a lot of appraisals come on my desk at the same time. Two, the appraiser was working under the auspices of a different company at the time. And right after your actually lot visits were done, Lance departed from that company and went back in business for himself. And that caused a little bit of a stir contracting-wise, because our contract was with the company, even though I only went with the company because of hiring Lance. And so we have to kind of fight it out. I'm trying to condense this all. Fight it out between the company to able to release the information, release the obligation from that, so I could get it to Lance and go through our contracting process. So that took a considerable amount of time. So 2, I had a lot on my desk. 3, I wanted going through the appraisals. There was just some fix-it stuff just by the sheer volume of the lots and how widespread the lots are as far as their attributes. The basin is one of the largest, again, next to the El Dorado and possibly the San Bernardino, so it does take a lot of time. So some of that was time on my end, time on Lance's end, and things did go back and forth. I'm going to be honest with us, between 3 and 4 times, just so I can make sure that, not that I just didn't understand it, I wanted to make sure, and you'll probably get laughed, that I made sure that it was understandable, because you have a lot of questions about it. So it was a little bit of everything. The stuff, there was a delayed release, so the forest, I'm going to tell on the forest actually had this information back in June. And so they made a conscious decision because of the workload on their plate and the timing. So you guys would get a full field season in order to get a second appraisal done if you wish to. They delayed release until January. So it's kind of a combination of a bunch of stuff.
I have 2 questions. First off, with respect to Lance and the company that you work for, what form of due diligence or reasonable care does the Forest Service conduct in validating the recommendations or the appraisal work that's done by the third party? Is there any sort of qualification that's performed using, again, another third party to come in and validate the work that he's done? Are there people internally at the Forest Service that provide some oversight? And that's part 1. And part 2, to go back to the attributes and the use of weighting averages, and is any of that information going to be published or available to us so we can take it to a third-party appraiser to evaluate?
Okay, let me take the first part of the question. So are you basically asking me how did I choose Lance as far as when things went out to contract bid for the assignment? Is that
really at the completion of the work?
Okay.
What sort of due diligence does the Forest Service conduct as the hiring party of the third party to ensure that the work being performed is?
I just didn't know which part of the process. Okay. So with the Forest Service, when it comes to appraisal work, so myself as a designated and delegated review appraiser, okay? So one, I'm delegated as a contracting officer's representative, so I have 2 roles. So I have to admit and go by the contracting process, which means that's checking on work to make sure that he has followed the contract specs, that things were turned in on time, payments are made, those types of things. The second part of my job is that I have delegated authority to this agency to review and hopefully approve appraisal reports on behalf of the agency. And that delegation comes through the chief of the Forest Service. Does not come from the regional forester. So it comes through the chief to the chief appraiser and then down to me as a regional appraiser to do that. My obligations then is to review that to make sure that they had followed the contract specifications that he was given, and that also with those contract specifications, that he's also followed the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice in which he and I are both licensed under the state of California to make sure that we met that due diligence. The other layer of due diligence is a uniform appraisal standards for federal land acquisition. So that is a big book of rules, okay? So I have to take all 3 of those documents along with Forest Service handbook guidance in doing reviews, which pretty much mirrors what's in, I'm going to be jargon here, the use PAP and the use FLA, okay? It's usually mirrored what's in those 2 regulatory documents. So taking that all into account, that's what I'm responsible for. So to be honest, when I go ahead and make it, I do a review and I approve it for agency use, that means that I can follow and agree with his methodology and his value conclusions. Does it go up another layer beyond me? No. The delegated authority I have unlimited value approval authority for the Pacific Southwest region, okay, which is California and Hawaii, okay? If I were to go outside my particular area or area of expertise, I'd have to get some other type of delegation, or maybe it might be capped at a dollar amount. But as of right now, I have unlimited authority to accept on behalf of the agency.
And how about this second question? Any information going to be published with respect to the attributes and the weighted average that he applied in creating his conclusions for the appraisals that we could take to the third-party appraiser himself and have evaluated. And again, I know you said there's no formula, there's a lot of subjectivity, but
I wish I could give you a better answer in regards to the methodology, and that's really what you're asking about. Two things that we have to deal with basically are standards and methodology. The standards, the ethics and standards, are what Kim referenced in regards to USPAP and USPLA. The other issue that comes up a lot with these kind of discussions has to do with methodology. And there's always debates and discussions about methodology. What I can say is that the appraisal that you do have and the methodology that was used, any appraiser is going to understand that methodology and be able to use it. So it wouldn't be something that they're unfamiliar with in that regard. So it may not be the best answer for you, but from a peer review, and I think that's also what you're asking about a little bit, from a peer review basis, the methodology and the standards that were used are well within the guidelines of what our training and expertise is all about.
And to be a little bit fair, I do know Tractor Tracks is already having another appraiser look at this. And I was contacted by that other appraiser who's doing that initial review, and he has some questions. And I'm always open to discussion and answering questions. In fact, with this particular appraiser, I have a very good rapport with. And so I do communicate well with this person. So if the appraiser that you're initially is looking through this has any questions, you can go through me. If it's something I think that maybe would be better discussed between Lance and your appraiser, I would then ask Lance, give him permission, because we are the client, so I have to give him permission in order to talk to that appraiser and be happy to do that as long as they're not going to be harassful about it. But usually the second appraisers that we have used in the past are just as much as the utmost professionals as the agency contracted appraisers.
This fellow gentleman.
Kim, I have a question directly for you. And this comes from comments that Lance made about market realities and marketability. And I just wondered if in your review of all these appraisers, and when you came up and approved the fees or the appraisal value, if you gave any thought to the raised fee that this amounted to would affect the marketability of these lots.
No, absolutely not. And I did not because if I did, that means I would be a biased appraiser and I would have my ethics challenged. Because I am licensed and given a review authority from this agency to be as, I'm going to say fair, to be ethical, to just go by the facts, okay? And I have to go by what's presented. Have we had appraisals? I kind of went, you kind of take that gulp because I know I'm going to be in front of meetings like this when the values go up high. And I know I kind of go, when I think the values are probably on the low side because I'm going to have Nancy's counterparts coming to me and say, what are you, But no, I go, it's just based on the facts and pure appraisal methodology. It's not to say I'm heartless and I don't understand some of the trauma and everything else this is going to bring to possibly families. But in my job, I can't. I have to walk that fine ethical line.
Will the same appraisal process be reinitiated in 2020?
Yes, if there is no passing of any other type of legislation, yes, we are on 10-year cycles.
So are we
your
talking
next go around will be 2020. That
double
means
again?
for earlier for us, we begin this appraisal process as early as 2016, 2017, which in my world is around the corner.
So could we have triple, like in our case, 7 times again?
No, it depends on the market and what we saw. It's probably not going to mean a lot for you folks being in this market area. Generally, what we saw is those that were on the lower side of the value or on the underside. At the 10 years ago, the markets values seem to correct itself in 10-year cycles. So those that were kind of on the low end last time seem to be on the higher end this time. Those who were on the higher end the last go around did not see their values raised. We had some floors where their values actually went down, or their fee is going to go down. I should say values, their fee is going to go down. So it just depends, and it depends on your market area. You guys are in a market area that's not as volatile or sensitive as it is in other market areas possibly, just because it's in the Lake Tahoe area. Okay?
Kim, if you could clarify the 3.5 year process that you went through and we all went through waiting. Lance or his parent company couldn't meet the performance dates. I think there were 4 performance dates.
No.
They could or couldn't?
No, they could. It just got hung up where Lance needed to leave that company for other, whatever reasons those were. And I had an issue, the Forest Service had an issue with the company. We would have never hired that company per se if Lance wasn't going to be the appraiser for the assignment. So that's where we kind of got crosswise, and we had to kind of come to détente, basically, with that company. Okay?
Well, it still seems to me if there's performance dates and they meet it, then this should have happened within 1.5 years.
Well, it's just a little bit more complicated than that. And actually, we got the company to release some issues because I was bringing up that particular issue right then and there. And nobody likes to be blackballed from ever getting federal contracts again. And that's what finally the company did to release the data so we could finish our work directly with Lance. Okay.
So I want to, on the question of is it going to happen in another 10 years, I think part of the answer to that is stay tuned, because if CFA goes through, then just like the last transition from the old system to CUPA, there would probably be a new transition, and who knows what that would look like. So, I mean, that's sort of the caveat out there. It is now a few minutes after 2 o'clock, and there are a couple other hands. I do want to take the opportunity to thank you all for being here. I would like to keep our questions focused on things that perhaps haven't been brought up so far, and I'll take the other 2 questions. But if you have other questions that's new information, not ground already tread, then we'll go ahead and continue with Q&A, and I'll run back here.
Kim, could you elaborate a little bit? You said on the second appraisal, for instance, if they use exactly the same data set, but they decided to take a different approach because basically Lance didn't, the adjustments for the differences between lots are not clear. It's in his professional judgment in the assignment of the percentages. If instead an appraiser would take what to me feels more straightforward, which is, say a lot that was in 2007, say, well, that's down, whatever, 20%, whatever is defensible. And, access is a big deal and has this kind of an effect. Would that approach be acceptable?
As long as the approach is supported by regular appraisal methodologies. He just didn't say, I'm just, using 20% because, okay? As long as there is logical and definitive information to support that look at the data and come in with a different opinion, it's got to be supported. I'm just not going to get this couple pages and just say minus 20% because I think it's 20% too high. No, I would probably disagree with that. But if they come in and totally support where they were going with that, sure, absolutely, I would approve it, as long as it met all the, specifications and all the other onerous things it has to meet and it's well supported. Yes.
Kim, I want to tell you, you're a half and a half. When you're an appraiser and you're a review appraiser, people don't understand when you're a review appraiser, you don't know anything about the appraisal beforehand. You just read and find if it's a logical conclusion that they reach. Now, I'd like to read something from, that was written for the 99 appraisal. Because the market recognizes the amount of land coverage of a parcel, a land coverage area is being assigned to the subject site based on the average coverage of the existing improvements within that group it represents. In addition to this base coverage, an additional 200 feet is being included for a paved driveway parking area per Tahoe Regional Planning Agency requirements. Based on the average land coverage within the tract, Lot 1 has been assigned 951 square feet of coverage. It is immediately adjacent to Highway 89 and faces the collective street. The traffic, well, I'll skip the rest of it. This is a well-forested, mildly upslope with an average amenity utility. And furthermore, in the 99 appraisal, Mr. Herzog did review the coverage within the tract and came up with about 900 feet, 950 feet, let's say, just close to this. Plus that meant the coverage under TRPA was 1,200 feet, and that was never covered in any, or even discussed in the 2010 appraisal.
Right, and that's because we had a little bit different appraisal specs, and for the assumption that was made, and I've got to read it because, it worked verbatim. It has to go with the assumptions and limiting conditions that were given to the appraiser that are from the appraisal specs, which are essentially from CUFA. And it has to do with, now I'm not going to be able to find it while I've got all these eyes looking at me, that we assume that it is a subdivided lot under the grandfathering provisions. No. Okay, hang on, guys. Who's got a copy of my review? Andy. Once I say it in my review. And so we kind of go through volumes and one big report. Okay. There were 5 hypothetical or extraordinary assumptions in appraisal. And the difference between the two is a hypothetical is a lie, okay? And an extraordinary assumption means it may or may not be true, okay? But we're assuming that it's true, okay? So one of them that says, lot size shall conform with all local zoning requirements in effect on the date of the original authorization and all applicable grandfathering provisions in effect on the date of value. So basically, we assumed that it meant TRPA requirements for a buildable lot and everything that went along with that. That was not an assumption that was made in the 1999 appraisal. So these are some of these differences that this was the interpretation that was taken out because of CUFA, okay? So some of those were determined in 99, some of them weren't. They were a little bit more black and white defined with the passing of CUFA. Lance did mention TRPA and some of those requirements, but that's the primary reason why he did get into exact definition of coverage, square footage of coverage, coming up with a sample or an example of what average coverage should be for a particular lot. We assumed, or he was told to assume, that it meant all local zoning requirements in effect of the date of value, okay, whether that includes grandfathering or not.
That's TRPA, determines what you build.
We are assuming that they are buildable lots, that they can have the capacity of maintaining a recreation residence on there.
But they're not buildable lots. That's the whole, it's so
But you have a
confusing.
cabin that's there, and we have to assume that they are because you're using public land for that purpose.
But a contractor could not come in and build on one of those
When we
lots.
do land exchanges, and this is how I can probably get back a little bit. Going a little off track, but I think I can kind of bring home the point. When we do, let's say, land exchanges for a recreational tract, and sometimes we do those in an area where it's next to private land, it's kind of lost its national forest character, you kind of go in, you don't know the difference between a private tract and the recreation residence tract. Kind of makes sense. We exchange out of it. And I know that these recreational lots are considered non-conforming, okay? They don't meet zoning requirements. However, we do land exchanges all the time and they go into private ownership. Usually they are given some type of grandfathering clause when that transforms into private ownership. If they weren't going to be granted that variance from the county to be a buildable lot, we would not relinquish your permit. We would only relinquish your permit when you're going to be made whole. Being made whole means you're going to get fee title, the deed to that lot. That's what usually takes the most time when we do land exchanges, because you have to come up with a tentative tract map approval from that particular county or zoning agency in order to approve those lots. So you're right, probably 99.9% of our res tracts and lots, in today's standards, they wouldn't be allowed to be built on, okay? But we have to assume, for one, the appraisal purposes that they are, and two, I know that they are given variances and some grandfathering because we've done land exchanges throughout many years with the different counties. One as recent as like 3 years ago in this region, we finished out a land exchange of a tract. So that's kind of hopefully brings it back home.
The mic here is here, so we have a question here, and I really want to target a time to conclude because a lot of the questions travel. So go ahead with your question.
Well, this isn't a question, this is a plea. Please write Senator Joe Tester, Democrat, Montana, and tell him to act on Senate Bill 1341, which is a cabin user fee act that's been sitting around doing nothing for quite some time. Also send a copy to Di-Fi and Barbara.
All right, that commercial message brought to you by this gentleman here. Right. This question over here, then I would like to wrap it up.
Kim, you mentioned several times that you had to suspend belief and presume that these lots, I forgot the term that you used earlier, but like a private lot. Why is that? Why did you have to make that presumption? Why did you have to suspend belief? Why couldn't we just run with the assumption that we're just comparing vacant property to vacant property as a comparison?
Okay, vacant property with what caveats to it? There's always got to be a caveat. So, if a vacant piece of public land?
Sure,
Yeah,
sounds good to me.
Because CUPA says not to. Okay, I'm bound by the legislation. And like I told folks, legislation in a lot of ways are good things because it carves things in stone, okay? So we have a process to go by. On the flip side, legislation has hard edges, okay, when you're in a box. When it's policy, like we had before, and the time before that, when it was a recreation residence policy, it was easier for the agency to take things under consideration and possibly change policy. Now we have specific legislation, we have specific rules promulgated from those legislation that was vetted out through the public and is now, it's way in stone because that exact same stuff is in our Forest Service handbook and annual policy. So, anyways, I can't look at it any other way. And I have to look at it with those 5 hypothetical assumptions or extraordinary assumptions.
This is a question for the Forest Service. When it goes so far and there's so many cabins on the market, right, and they can't be sold, and if someone can't pay this land use fee, from what I understand, if you walk away because you can't pay the fee anymore, they come in, they bulldoze the cabin, and you have to pay for the bulldozing. Is that true? I want to know if it's true.
It's not so specific.
Huh? I know what happened, I know of one cabin it happened to.
It's an assumption that they can't be sold. I think any property that
is contiguous to or sitting on National Forest land is considered desirable property. So,
Not if you have 50% of it for sale. That's what could happen here.
I would
well,
suggest-
Jonathan, go ahead.
I would suggest the facts and circumstances to each tract are, we can't answer it yes or no right now. We would take each case on its own individual merits. The values that would be at risk in each different tract are just totally different.
But my question is, would you come in and bulldoze the cabin if we don't pay our fees any longer? And make us pay for the bulldozing?
Removal of a cabin is one draconian measure that could occur without payment.
Well, it's not that draconian. From what I
But
understand,
let me
it
just kind of run through
happened
some other options. Though,
it
because
happened at 50 up, from what I understand.
Yep, on the El Dorado. I remember that story
Yeah,
very well.
yeah.
Other options include moving the cabin. Other options including the agency
At our
taking-
expense, right?
Hold on a second. The agency may take ownership of that private investment and then sell it. The agency could, I guess, trade out of it if it was part of something larger, a larger process. Who pays for it? Again, I would say it depends. More times than not, that cost would be borne by the permittee.
And what if you can't pay for it? What if you can't pay for it? Do they put you in Forest Service jail or something? I mean, what happens if you can't pay for it?
It's, you know, I can tell this is a serious issue for a lot of folks, and I don't want to diminish this because I have received a lot of phone calls from folks who are just scared about losing something that's been in their family for generations. So I don't say these words lightly. But yes, I mean, the permits are built in a way that what it does is it tries to protect that public interest when individuals have private improvements. So more times than not, we try to get that individual, that family, to pay for the removal, to pay for the remediation, things of that nature. But I would share that, again, the facts and circumstances of each cabin would be a little bit different. There could be other interests in play. Let me just maybe close with this idea that for those of you who are struggling or looking at the potential for fee increases, we have offered payment plans going forward, and for some that's not going to help if their fee has gone up, but for others it may. We have the phase-in of fees. We have folks who are working on SBET. That's not panacea for a lot, but it could make some stability for folks.
The phase-in is a given, right? They're going to phase in.
The phase-in is a given if your fee is over 100%. Yes.
Mine is 700%.
Yes.
700%.
It's a guarantee prescribed by the law. I don't want the, and it was mentioned earlier, we really have, we don't see this money locally. Our relationship is with you all. It's not with our congressmen. We work on trail projects together. We work on hazardous tree removal, things of that nature. So we are bound to follow the law. At the same time, we hope you can understand that we do care for you all, and we want you to be successful. And it's sometimes we find ourselves in a tough spot.
Thank you. We appreciate that. My question is to the selection of the cabins. It's my understanding, just from what I heard today, that certain tracts have designated which lots they wanted to have appraised due to the strength of their tract association.
No, I mean, we need to agree that the typical lots that have been identified and agreed to do fit with one another. It's not based on the strength of the association. But if we have factual errors whereby typical lots really didn't make sense, you can provide that to us. We can take a look and we can either agree or disagree that, yeah, this should have been considered in a different typical lot grouping. But it's not based on the strength of the association.
Well, I don't know, because I find it interesting that our little Riverside cabin is appraised a lot higher than an Emerald Bay view lot from Emerald Bay tract. that has
They
a
have a
real estate
lawyer.
lawyer on their
They
track
have a
board.
lawyer, that's a difference.
Well, we kind of got two different questions. So I thought your first one was that about how the typical lots were chosen.
Well, some people got special help in choosing the right lots.
Right. They tracked, directed the appraiser to the lots they wanted to have appraised.
Okay, the thing is, no, that's not true, because when I contract and give him his assignment, he already knows what typical lots he is appraising. So they were not directed. What we did do is, first we started off with what was appraised 10 years ago, those typical lots. Every tract was notified that these we're going to use the same lots unless you brought up some evidence or something that you felt that it should be changed to better represent a grouping. Some areas we deleted a typical lot, some places we changed them, some places we added some. Bats initially came back and said, okay, after we worked through all that, and it had it vetted through the permit holders to the forest checked with me on some things. Final decision was with the forest supervisor over which typical lots were going to be appraised. That's final decision. However, when we did go out there on the lot visit, sometimes when you're going out there on the ground and you look at something, all of a sudden it's just like, this doesn't make sense. And that was the last time we kind of opened it up for, if we're going to make a change, this was going to be it, because I wasn't going to keep paying the appraiser to go back out to look at lots at a different time. I'm trying to think if there's any, I think we changed a couple when we were out on the ground, and it was basically it better represented that positive or negative attribute. In some areas, I think we eliminated a lot or two and regrouped them because it made more sense, but it was not the appraiser's choice in all that. I may have asked him, just like, well, what are your thoughts? Do you think one is better represented as an average? Remember, typical lot should be kind of like an average of whatever market factor that it's representing. But other than that, though, it was not the appraiser's choice.
It was largely based on 99.
Yep.
And
Just
very few changes.
But 99% are about the same that were appraised.
1999.
No, I
Yeah.
understand.
Yes.
It's just not what I was told.
But let's, we certainly have tracks with, let's just say, more engaged individuals.
Right.
But that doesn't change our perception of that track or how we treat sort of the choosing of typicals and working with folks to identify typical.
I would say is that, for instance, those tracts that are part of the whole Ethel Lakes area are a very engaged and vocal tract. When it came down to it, I think we just changed maybe 2 typical lots because they provided evidence.
2 or 3, but not many.
They provided evidence to me. It wasn't just like because we wanted, because they provided some evidence. It's like, we think this better represents this type of grouping. And that was it. And the final decision was with the forest supervisor. So,
You know, ultimately, Tahoe is going to be just for the wealthy.
Yes.
There's not going to be any middle class. I mean, this is kind of the last bastion, I think, where the middle class can have a little cabin up in the mountains, right? And it's not going to, it's ultimately, it's just going to be for wealthy people. And I don't know, what happened to what's happening to the middle class in this country? We're the ones that pay the taxes, we pay the fees, and it's just like they squeeze us more and more. And
There's a
we're
question
being,
over here.
So I was wondering how you can justify a cabin that is the largest one in the tract and it has stated river access in its appraisal as one of its amenities, and it's appraised at $60,000. And a lot that you can see from that same lot, which is a smaller lot and has a beautiful view of the .com McMansions built in front of it, is appraised at $95,000. 33% more for something that's worse. Where's the logic in that?
it may not just be worse. We have to look it up.
What tract is
and see
that?
to see if there was a difference in access. The season of access,
It's all the same, exactly the same.
permittee provided improvements versus not.
There's no improvements, it's an end lot. You have to appraise
Okay,
that to
there's
make it lot.
roads that are part of improvements.
It's all the
There's
same
season of
road.
access
It's
that
the
we
same
have.
road. Everything's the same.
Okay, then we'll take a look at it. Then we'll take a look at it to see what happened.
Let's go
Seriously.
two more, if you don't mind. We've got two here. Yes.
I want to go back for a moment to the TURPA and Lahontan restrictions on, I think it's applicable to all of us here in this room, all the trucks and Lake Tahoe Basin. And while, yes, we're grandfathered in the fact that we have a structure on the lot, which we probably wouldn't be allowed to show today that we're facing. But that structure is limited to the footprint it has today. It can't be enlarged at all. The footprint is what it is. And that's not true of comparables in Nevada County and in Placer County outside of the basin. Those are not they're limited by county in terms of how big a structure can be put on them. And so to say, I've assumed one is buildable and the other is buildable, is a mischaracterization of what the regulations are doing there. And certainly CUFA does not take TURPA into account.
Right.
CUFA doesn't say ignore TURPA regulations.
Right, and that's why.
And the TURPA regulations limit, in other words, I've got the ability, our typical lot is limited to about 700 square feet. And, how much a person pays for a lot in Amador County to build a cabin that could be 5,000 square feet is a lot different. And I don't see any adjustment being made from the typical lot, which can only support a 700 square foot cabin, to one in, the name pops out at me, Markleyville, which can support any size of cabin. And shouldn't that adjustment have been made?
Because it's not necessarily, I don't think there's going to be an adjustment there when you're looking at locations outside the basin that may not have as stringent building restrictions. Because I can guarantee you that the lot values were at Lake Elsinore, the ones that were further down, closer to Markleyville, and even the ones in other areas were still significantly, not significantly, they were less than the Lake Tahoe Basin. So there's other things that are considered into that process besides just having TRPA limiting maybe your cabin footprint that we didn't take in, that's not taken into consideration.
But I don't see any discussion of that at all.
Because of the grandfathering hypothetical that I put in there, that it would meet local and we pretend that it's a private lot. Meeting the basic TRPA abilities to build a recreation residence. So that means that limitation should be into effect for any other sale that we use in and around the area, which is a double-edged sword because CUFA also says that we cannot use sales in urban areas, okay? So if I use the sales, because I have folks in here who have got me on that from the 1999 appraisal, that says, wait a minute, don't you use sales here because they're in urban areas. It's defined as an urban area. Okay, so we have to use them from somewhere, and I don't see as that being a factor that needs to be reconciled given the hypothetical condition that we were told to use. And I don't think you can add a little more to that or not.
We're going to go last question only because we have room. The latest we can be in here is 3 o'clock, and then I have no budget, so this is my personal credit card challenge.
I just think that when the cabin recreation were established, when the cabins were first made, there was something in the law, it still stands in the law, that they were created for people to go out in the national sports and enjoy nature. And they were created for middle class people. And that's not what it's supposed to be.
Actually,
and I'd like to make one more comment. I'll preface it by saying we don't think that any of the values of the lakes, of the values of the lots appraised on Echo Lake should be raised. But most of them, the majority of them, are lower, appraised lower than ours on the road.
okay.
Echo's the lake. Cabins on the
She's on
lake.
Echo Road.
And I'm on Echo Road, and most of your cabins are appraised around 60 on the lake. And we don't think their appraisal should be raised. We think that $100,000 for a lot on the road, especially given the recent traffic problems coming into Echo Lake. I mean, the inside of my cabin on a weekend smells like exhaust. And I just think that there's other things to be considered besides access.
Right, there is access that you have to vote out your own. Yes, that is a big, another consideration for those lake-in properties, as I was properly reminded earlier. There are some other factors to do that. If there's a lot of public going in there, you're in an area of high demand.
Yeah.
Okay? And what does demand do to price?
There's a lot of, for us that have cabins on the road, there's a lot of just interference of our enjoyment of our cabins because of all the traffic.
Right, and that's because of the amount of use the national forest is getting, which was, I kind of get back to the point I was going to make, when recreation residences were first established, especially out in the west, was because we were trying to get people out to enjoy the national forest. We didn't have a lot of users. That times have changed. We have so much use now in the national forest, we kind of don't know what to do with it, okay? And then you gave a great example.
Can I ask you though, is that a factor? The fact that the traffic, we don't see it as access. The traffic is a nuisance for us. Is there a nuisance factor that can take away from our cabins being right on the road just because of terribly crowded? Times have changed. That we should not do it.
Okay, I've been, write to me or email me, probably the easiest, and just say, I want you to go back and see if you have considered the amount of traffic that we get if it was taken into account, so Lance can go back and recheck what he's done.
Right.
But
And also,
bring that up.
so are the lake cabins considered inaccessible? Or did they emphasize all the public coming in there all the time? Is that why they got lower? Why did they get lower appraisals than we did? They're on the lake, man.
Because they have to, at most point, either hike in or boat in, and they have to boat out their sewage. Okay?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But you're
Instead of
saying that
flushing the
those,
toilet.
but you
Okay?
you
So
said that those things
that's
don't need to
a
be on the
huge
assessment.
Well, then that was my good reason to go back to Echo, and they're asking why theirs were so much higher than what they feel like it should be. And part of it is location, part of it is part of those attributes, positive or negative.
But you said that it's only the lot, that it's only the lot that's being taken into consideration. Not the road to it, not the access, not the utilities, just the lot. So
Okay, but
you're
if
making a
there's-
special
if there is
compensation.
busy noise, traffic, or if the only way you can get to that lot is to always walk in or always boat in, that's a physical factor that we need to take into account. If you're in an area, because of it's next to a lake, and this is pretty common next to our lake tracts in most areas, that the type of septic system that they can have is not generally the same kind you can have at Rainbow Tract, okay? So they either have to physically remove it out in canisters, they have to try to figure out some type of composting if that's allowed, or an incendiary toilet. It can be done, but a buyer of those lots would consider that it would probably cost a little bit more money into investment to bring that up into something usable. And that's why you have some of these offsetting things. That yes, they have a beautiful lakefront lot, however, it's only accessible so many months of the year.
Ours is only accessible 6 months of the year.
But you can drive right to your cabin.
No.
They can't.
No.
At rainbow tracks?
Gates are locked.
The gates
At
are
rainbow
locked.
tracks?
And 6 months out of
6
the
months.
year.
Yes.
The gates are closed and locked.
Okay, then you can drive to it. Those, we have
can't
lots of
drive
that
to it.
never drive to, ever, no matter what time of year it is. So those things all have to be taken into consideration.
So what I want to do is wrap this up. The audience is thinning right now anyway. I think a lot of people do have to travel. But I really sincerely appreciate that you all came out. These are not easy issues. If they were easy, it would be so simple to just sign things off, call it good, and head on down the road. But the reality is, it's complex. We all struggle through trying to work through these interpretations. We are bound by law. And I really encourage folks to stay engaged. The most important thing for all of us is to stay actively engaged. And so again, I appreciate your time, and I do encourage you to keep stay informed on the Cabin Fee Act and proposed legislation that our gentleman over here did the quick telemarket on. And really that may, with any perseverance and continued participation in that process, we hope to get to a better place. And we will work through that when the time comes to. So again, thank you very much. Please be careful driving. Right now, we seem to have no rain, but I'm sure there will be microclimates as you go, and I'm hoping there's not too much snow on top, but we will head out. Thanks again.
Thank you.